Hello, and welcome to another TRADOC Leader Professional Development discussion. I'm Sarah Hauk, Command Information Chief for the TRADOC Communication Directorate, and the moderator for today's event, where we're going to discuss how to transform an organization. We're keeping the sports theme going this episode with our guests, who we'll introduce in just a second. First, I want to welcome back General Paul E. Funk II, TRADOC's Commanding General. Thank you, sir, for joining us. It's always great to have you for these LPDs.
Well, thanks for having me, Sarah. I really do appreciate it. And I'm so looking forward to today's guest because she's just dynamite.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir, for joining us. And as I mentioned earlier, we'll be discussing organizational transformation. Our guest today is Cynt Marshall, the CEO of Dallas Mavericks and the CEO of Marshalling Resources Consulting. In 2018, Ms. Marshall became the first African-American woman CEO in the NBA. During her first 100 days, she was able to drastically change the organizational culture, particularly in the areas of diversity and inclusion. Prior to becoming the Mavericks CEO, Ms. Marshall founded Marshalling Resources, a consulting firm specializing in leadership, diversity and inclusion, cultural transformation, and overall optimization of people resources. Prior to shifting to her recent positions, Ms. Marshall spent more than 36 years at AT&T, where she led several teams to diversity and inclusion success. Ms. Marshall continues to be a trailblazer in leadership and has won numerous awards for her diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. Ms. Marshall, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me here today. It's good to see you, Sarah, and it's so good to be here with my friend, General Funk. We promised that we would get back together and that we would talk about this topic, and so I'm glad we were finally able to make it happen. So it's good to see both of you.
Great to see you, Cynt.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining us. And the Army has been focusing on changing its culture to better align the force as a profession ready to compete and win in multi-domain operations with a focus on its people. Today, we're going to dive into how organizations can fully change and sustain success with these transformations. As a reminder, before we get started, we want you to be part of this discussion. So leave your questions in the comments section, and we'll try to get them answered during this event. And with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. Ms. Marshall, we're going to come to you. So you were able to completely reinvigorate the Mavericks culture, particularly in the areas of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and as a leader and as an organization as a whole. So how do you start making those huge changes to an organization when you're brand new to it?
Oh, I love that question, and you're right. I mean, it's a huge change. I think there is a recipe, okay? And so I'll try to kind of hit different pieces of that, different ingredients as we kind of progress through this. But I think it actually starts with a vision. And so, of course, and that vision, kind of comes from the top. The tone is set at the top. And so when I got to the Mavs, of course, we know that, they were having some struggles around just the workplace culture and more than struggles. I mean, we some of us know the story about how I got there with the Sports Illustrated article and what was said about the Mavericks and some of the things that were going on there. And so I came in and laid out a vision, and the vision said we would set the global standard. So the global standard in the NBA for diversity, equity, or diversity and inclusion. And so we added the equity piece later. And the reason I started there, I didn't start with revenue. I didn't start with, ticket sales or a championship. I didn't start with anything, quote unquote, basketball related. The reason I chose diversity and inclusion is because it drives everything. And there is a business case, a true business case. I mean, McKinsey has done studies on it. Others have done studies on it. There's a true business case, and it talks about the diversity dividend and how your business is better, how you can win the war for talent, how you can respond better to customers and get more insight, how you can engage your employees more and the level of employee satisfaction, innovation. So many things point to what happens when you have the right culture and when you have a diverse workplace, when you have an inclusive culture, which is so in the diversity piece, and when it is operating in your workplace throughout your processes and all of that. So I figured if we started there, if we started by trying to create an inclusive culture, if we started there, and then there's a whole kind of spectrum to that we'll get into, that we would be successful as a business. And then I laid out a set of values. And we took that vision, the set of values, one-on-ones with all the employees, really engaging them because it's all about the people. And we laid out a 100-day plan that I know we'll talk about. And that's kind of where I started. And, so far so good. It's been 4.5 years now.
Yeah, that's quite the feat, and obviously people are responding to it, and I think that's one of the biggest things with transformational, just organizational transformations is how do you get buy-in from those individuals? I know within the Army, and specifically within TRADOC, we are focused on changing our culture, but that includes sharing it outside of our walls so that people know what we stand for. So
right.
How do you, General Funk, I'll go to you first. So how do we share that culture and make sure that it's practiced and seen and heard within us, and then share it outwardly so that people know who we are and what we stand for?
Well, what is a tremendous point is that we have to be able to share it outside, right? We have to be able to open the window that is the Army, open our camps, posts, and stations, and reconnect America to its Army. We also have to, but they have to, our values have to resonate with the young men and women who are getting ready to serve. And they have to be representative of the American people. And so the Army's values are America's values. That's what we stand for. And in order to be able to do that, you have to have some sort of program like Cynt just described, where you come in with some vision, and then from the vision you actually build culture, and you include more and more people, and then pretty soon your narrative's coming back to you. And it's a narrative of success and opportunity and finding a way to overachieve all kinds of various struggles, but understanding and recognizing that the reason we serve is to fight and win our nation's wars, and we are the representatives of the American people around the globe. Frankly, that's what we have to be able to do.
Absolutely, and I know we've put a huge emphasis, and you've encouraged the enterprise to put an emphasis on getting out into their communities to share those cultures. Yeah. And I know changing a culture takes time. So to be able to take those pieces of our culture that we've changed and improved and reformed and take them outside the gates is really, really positive. So
one of the things that Cynt hit on that is even more, it's a winning culture too, right? So the Mavericks have developed a winning culture as well, and that's what the Army does, right? The chief staff of the Army says winning matters, and that it does, but in order to do it, winning in the right ways is exactly the kind of culture you're trying to achieve, and so are we.
Exactly. You win because you are playing on a solid, you're standing on a solid foundation when you're playing. And that's what our values are. It's that foundation for us. And our values spell crafts. And so we have this hashtag perfect our crafts, because we're trying to do that every day. And craft stands for character, respect, authenticity, fairness, teamwork, and safety. And if I get time, please remind me to come back and tell you the story that I shared with our team about character, to just make it real for our people. And so what I love is, and you talked about, General, how it comes back to you. I love when I hear our folks now talking about our crafts and calling it out with each other. And like safety is one of our values, and it's physical and emotional safety. And so that one is pointed to a lot. Or authenticity, where we want people to really be themselves and to know who they are, and we want to accept them and meet them kind of where they are. I mean, that person who gets up out of bed in the morning, the background they have, the cultures they have, the issues they have. I mean, we want all of that to walk into our doors and to be welcomed in our doors. Now, maybe we don't want you in your pajamas. Maybe we want you to put on your, dress up to come in. That's right. But we want that person, and we as leaders, we have to be able to meet that person where they are. We want the teamwork. We want people to feel respected and to give respect. But at the top of it is character, and we want that integrity displayed every single day. And so we want to be known by those crafts. And so we talk about those externally a lot. Those are our values that we stand on and off the court.
What's great about what you just said are your values are our values. So loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, and personal courage. Y'all, if you look at it, that's leadership, right? LDRSHIP. That's exactly what we're trying to do, and that starts day one from turning a citizen into a soldier. That's the kind of culture, that's the kind of ethic, that's the kind of value that we bring to the equation.
Yes, and you accept them because fortunately for me, I have family members and others who were in the Army, and God bless everybody who is serving us. I mean, all of you. And so I have truly seen that, where you take them and accept them for who they are. You meet them where they are when they walk in, and then you stand them on this foundation. And I've been a recipient of what comes out on the other end. But it started with accepting who they were and giving them that foundation, and then teaching them that they're leaders too. I mean, we're all leaders. I mean, I've seen that up close and personal. So maybe somewhere deep down inside, when I developed these values, I was thinking about you. Who knows?
Well, I hope so. That would make me feel good, to tell you the truth.
I wanted to kind of talk about that foundation both of you have mentioned in our values. So we kind of call them here in the Army our non-negotiables. Absolutely cannot change. They must be something that our newest individual has to have within them, or begin working on individually to become that. So what would the Mavericks non-negotiables be, and how do you, as you're changing a culture to be more positive and successful, how do you be sure that those non-negotiables don't change, but then adjust them to meet your high standards of transformation?
Okay, so I love that question. So here's what I did when I got to the Mavs. I met with every single employee one-on-one, which is very easy to do because we were talking at that time probably about 120, 140 people. We're not talking like tens of thousands like in the Army. But I would, and when I worked at AT&T and was responsible for tens of thousands of people, of course, I couldn't talk to all of them, but I'd always try to pick like 100 people or so, and in this case, a little more than that. And I met with them one-on-one for a few purposes. I just wanted to get to know them as people. Because they're not employees. These are the people who just so happen to be employees. So I want to get to know them as people. And I would start out the same way. I would say, give me your story. Give me your whole life story. And usually they'd say, this is my 10th season at the Mavs. This is my 3rd season at the Mavs. And I said, were you born here? Like, I want your whole story. I want to know who I'm sitting here talking to, because my job is to serve. I mean, just like General Funk. Our jobs are service jobs. All of us. And so I'm here to serve these people. So I need to know who they are. So they tell me their story. Then we talk about what was going on at the Mavs. Then I would close the same way. And I would say, think 5 years from now, which is interesting because we're almost at the 5-year mark. I said, tell me where you see yourself 5 years from now, whether it's at the Mavs or not. Just where do you see yourself personally and professionally? Because part of my job also is to make sure that you're able to get there. And so after I interviewed, talked to all these people, and then what I would do in those meetings, I would personally cover our values. And I know you all have all kind of sessions where you sit down with the folks and talk about the non-negotiables. And I would personally talk about the non-negotiables. And we had a code of conduct that we put in place, and it's called the Code of Conduct. We do the annual training on it every year. We point to it all the time. It's written. I know you have it too. And we tell them integrity matters. Okay, we have zero tolerance for lies, for false allegations, for obviously sexual harassment, misconduct, inappropriate behavior, anything like that. We absolutely play team. If you don't play team, you probably won't be working here. Safety is important to us. We are all responsible. We have this little thing that we put out that describes all of our values. And the question is, who's responsible for safety? All of us. And then we go deep what that looks like. And we talk consequences if we don't see those kinds of behaviors. We cover it in our performance review process. And so when you look at our values, these are the things in there that are also in our code of conduct, and they are non-negotiables. This is how we operate. This is who we are. This is how we do business, and we are free to speak up. Speak up is a big part of our culture. Have a speak up culture, and to have it where people do not have to fear retaliation. And so we've talked about that. If we see someone trying to retaliate against an employee for speaking up, we deal with that. I mean, some things are just non-negotiable, and they're all around our values. Especially, obviously, when I got there, our whole 100-day plan was around modeling zero tolerance. So making it real clear what we stood for, what we would not tolerate, what we absolutely had zero tolerance for. We wouldn't say it wouldn't happen because things happen, but we won't tolerate it when it happens. And then we had us express Mav's women's agenda because we really wanted to send a message we had to, that women get to thrive and be successful and be in leadership around here too. And we know it's a male-dominated environment in sports in the NBA. I mean, obviously we have the WNBA, and so, but we want to make it clear that this was a place where women could thrive and excel too. And anyone who didn't want to accept that wouldn't be at the Dallas Mavs. And then, of course, all of our operational effectiveness kinds of things. There's a way we do business, and there's a culture that we will have. And I did personal training on inclusive behaviors, what that looks like, what it looks like in meetings, how it operates day to day. I mean, just try to help, you have to go like real deep, because some people, especially like in your place in the Army, you're getting like such young people. I mean, you got to go deep. I know you do, where you just have to give examples and talk to people. Right. And so we did that.
Well, it sounds like to me what you really, another piece of what you're talking about is trust, which is our non-negotiable. That's what we build, the foundation of all our leadership and everything we're doing is about that. And so it sounds exactly like where we're going on that, the trust piece of that. And then, when we talk about assessment of where you want to be in 5 years, we have a thing called Project Athena. Which actually starts from when you come in as a soldier all the way through when you go to be a general. We help you assess where you are on your leadership traits, how you can build, where your blind spots are, and how you're coming back to. And then we give you access to counselors and mentors and things like that can help you do this. So we're invested in the leadership business. Yeah, which it sounds exactly like you are. Everyone's a leader. Everyone's a safety officer. We say that routinely in the Army as well. So I think the Army rubbed off on you a little bit.
I think it did, because I love two of the words that you mentioned, invest, because it is an investment in your people. You spend time, you invest in them. We have something where I call it all-in leadership, and one of the N's, if you will, is leading with intent. And being very intentional about how you invest in your people. And so we looked at our organizational infrastructure. We looked at what kind of training people needed, what kind of staffing they needed, our whole inclusion and diversity strategy, all of the assessments that you talked about, providing coaches to people, executive coaches, leadership coaches, workplace coaches. I mean, giving them the things that they needed, the professional counselors, just to help them in the workplace. It is truly an investment, and leaders have to make that investment. And yes, you have to spend money to do it, but it's, pay me now, pay me later. Because if you don't,
exactly.
you have bad workplace culture, you're gonna be playing lawyers, you're gonna be doing all kind of stuff. And then we also, and we invested in our employee resource groups too, because we wanted to have these affinity groups with allies. I mean, so there are people in these groups that don't look like the people in the groups, just to have a way to help all of us understand different cultures. And that actually worked out well for us when some of the social injustice issues came to light a couple of years ago. We had these groups already in place where we could have these courageous conversations and all that. And the trust had been built where people were comfortable. So that's the other word you use, trust. We have a pyramid that we always point to that really kind of summarizes our business plan, our vision, our values, what are the strategic focus areas for the year, et cetera. And so one side of that pyramid talks about return on investment and how that is critical to our success. And then there's the piece that there's the bottom piece of it. So literally on the base, it says trust accelerates our success. So yeah, we can talk about what's important to our success, what will drive our success, but trust is what truly accelerates our success. So we got all of our people to book The Speed of Trust. by Stephen M. R. Covey. Don't you love that book?
I do.
And I love it because, okay, you can tell me why you love it too. I love it because it gives such practical examples of what happens when you don't have trust in the workplace, right, and how you're just recycling things and people are reading stuff in the emails. And I mean, and you're just like wasting all this time.
Yes.
But then if you do have trust, you don't have to second guess motives and all that. Decisions are made just like that. So we gave all of our people that book so they could really understand what we mean by trust and why it actually, from a practical standpoint, really matters.
Well, I actually had my brigade read that before we deployed to the surge in Iraq.
Oh, wow.
And you know, it takes the piece of time, right? Time spent together, and how it is that you can develop good habits and be faster than your adversary, your enemy, your, you know, whatever you want to call it in the civilian world. You can actually move faster and make quicker decisions and better decisions by understanding the ability that trust provides you. And so,
that is so true.
Yeah,
that's so true. So true. It's a strategic element.
Yes.
It really is.
Yeah, I agree.
And
with that.
It sounds basic, but a lot of times it's not present in a workplace or on a team, and then you're taking too long, and in your case, it can be deadly. Okay.
Around trust is mission command. That's our actually command and control philosophy, right? So you establish left and right limits. You develop a vision. You develop lines of effort, and then you execute based on the right and left limits that you've done them. The commander's intent, you said, to be intentional. So the commander's intent on what we look at the end state of the mission to be. And that's how we fight the whole fight. That's what makes us different than any other army in the world. That's what makes us, you know, much more different than what's going on in the Ukraine or anything else, is that ability for our non-commissioned officers to look at that and see it as well. So the words are the same. I mean, it's really successful organizations like yours and ours truly go on these principles, first principles, as it were.
Yes, and they are principles. And you know what? You made me think of something when you're talking too, is that when the trust is not there, our people know it. They know when the leaders don't trust each other. They know when there are problems there, and then they get sucked up in all that too. And then you're just not getting things done. So it is so important to just be able to move quickly, is to have everybody on the same page and the leaders trusting each other, because that just trickles on down. I'm really big on the notion of shadow of the leader. Whatever shadow that leader is casting is going throughout the entire organization. And we need to cast a good one and a trusting one for our people in a model.
Absolutely.
So I have a question for General Funk. Being just the nature of our organization, we have leaders that come and go just because they have different assignments. Like yourself, you'll transition out. So when you have this culture, how do you ensure that the next leader creates that positive shadow that continues the mission forward? Maybe with some different changes based on their leadership philosophy, but how do you make sure that the foundation doesn't crack when you hand it over?
Well, I kind of go with Funk's fundamental number 40 there, Sarah, on that one, to tell you the truth. Leave your jersey in a better place every day. So if you do that, you develop, it's really more how effective your organization is after you leave than when you're there. Because when you're there, you can really drive the organization, but it's the legacy you leave. And how do you do that? Through development of people of character. It's in the investment in the people, right? So they'll understand what's got to happen, right? And then they look to the next leader and build trust there. But those things are all. That's the only way you can do it, is build an organization that is resilient, determined, based on values and based on intent, as Cynt said, the intention to, support, fight, and win our nation's wars. Okay, so that if we're reflecting that, then we're going to be okay.
Absolutely.
And you know what? And you're right. I mean, it's in the DNA.
Yeah.
I mean, it is truly in the DNA. And when you have new leaders coming, people taking over leadership, different positions, if they're already in the organization, they know. Because first of all, they wouldn't be elevated and they wouldn't get the new position if they didn't already model those values and practice trust and all that, because that's part of the promotion criteria. But if they're new, like from the outside or something like that, the folks will let them know real quick what we're about here. And so that's why the onboarding process is so important too. And even when people get promoted internally and all that, there's still the onboarding process to that actual new level. Because, as you get into these new levels, you have to look at things differently. The responsibilities are different and all that. So that onboarding process is key. And to make sure those values and those expectations and those principles are built in that process. And then you have that dialogue about, okay, now here's what it looks at. Here's what it looks like and how we practice it kind of at this level.
Well, and the onboarding, I can't thank you enough for bringing up onboarding. It's so important. How people are received by your organization matters. And we're working really hard to do that, right? Your first experience in the Army should be, literally should be a positive experience. So we've changed the entire way people are welcomed. We used to have a thing called the shark attack. And frankly, it was from the movies, and it took a lot of lore and things like that. And it was breaking trust. So a recruiter would convince you to come serve, and then some raving lunatic would get a hold of you, and before you knew it, you were broken down. That's not the Army we want to be part of. And that's how they might have had to do it when we had a draft. But these young men and women are all volunteers. If you truly believe that they are the absolute treasure of the nation, its sons and daughters, if you truly believe that, then you want to build them up. You want them to trust their leaders from the start. You want them to develop good habits and good culture and come into their leaders when they have issues and problems so that they can help them through it. That's how we got to attack some of these things.
Exactly. You don't want to, I just love that. And I love that the approach was changed because you want to nurture people's spirits. You don't want to break their spirit. Now, I'll tell you a real quick story. All of my children are adopted. So they're all adopted out of foster care. They all have their own abandoned, abuse, neglect story. And so one of my daughters was born in San Francisco General Hospital and born to a heroin addict, prostitute mother, and she was left in the hospital. 2 pounds. Just a fighter, though. They did not expect her to live. She did. And she's a fighter, truly a fighter. And when we met her, she was 2 years old and she was an angry little girl, but she was a fighter. She's a survivor. She had gone through a lot. And I remember a coworker telling me one time, because my daughter I already had a son and she was throwing stuff at him. She just, tough girl, mean little girl. And I remember a coworker telling me one time, she said, Cynt, you guys are going to have to tame that spirit with a lot of nurturing and love, not kill it. And I'll never forget that, because now I also apply that to the workplace. We have all kind of people who come to work for us. They bring all kind of stuff with them, all kind of approaches, personalities, things they've seen that they think work, maybe they don't work. And so as leaders, we kind of culture and nurture that spirit. And yes, sometimes we have to get that spirit tamed and kind of under control, but we don't take the shark approach to try to kill it, because you want that. You want all that feistiness, but you want them to trust you too as you're trying to help them do it the way it needs to be done.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I love that story. I might have to use that again.
I'll never forget when she told me that, because we were getting kind of frustrated. I think the things I was telling her we were doing, we were actually kind of killing my daughter's spirit. Like early on, we had just adopted the girl. And she was letting me know that might not be the best thing, because at the end of the day, it's like you want that spirit. You want that fighting spirit, and you want that person to take it on. Sometimes there's just an appropriate way to do it, and you have to kind of help them not be destructive.
Yeah, you go.
And it's the same way with the employees.
That's exactly right.
It sounds a lot like how our new recruits, their first experience with the Army is this is my squad. We really
Yes,
try to get
that's
connected
right.
with our individuals
Exactly.
because we want them to bring their diversity, and their
Yes.
is what makes our Army so unique and so successful. So we've got to be able to pull that out of them through the This Is My Squad, getting
Correct.
to know them, having those
That's right.
conversations,
Yeah.
and being able to shift them through our talent management into somewhere where their energy could be more positive and effective for the team in the long run.
Exactly.
So yeah, I think
And-
that's,
Yeah, exactly right.
yeah. So we do actually have a question from the audience. So Ms. Marshall, we're going to start with you. And then I also want to kind of throw this at you, General Funk, as well from the Army perspective. So they want to know what some of the best practices for measuring success would be in terms of transformational cultures. And then how do you ensure that things like diversity and inclusion stay a priority? Because longevity and cultural change, because it is so big, can be a little bit of a question. So how do you measure that and keep it going?
Okay, so let me take the first question. So I'm loving these questions. Okay, so we make sure that we measure our culture, and so we have our own culture survey that we do a few times a year, and we have to do a little bit more. We have to do more pulse surveys, kind of during COVID, where we would just send a question out and take a pulse on a particular thing. And then we did some pulse surveys when we had some of the social justice issues going on, just to kind of see where people are and how they're feeling about things kind of in life and in our workplace. So we actually measure it. So the MBA also has a culture survey as well. So we take all of those data points, and so it has a series of questions. And it covers just the gamut around culture, around how you work with people. I mean, just everything you can think of in the organization. And then it also has a section for verbatim comments, and they know it's all anonymous. And I love going through the verbatim comments. Now, we have some of the top cultural survey results in the MBA, and we just won the MBA's Inclusion Leadership Award again for the second time. But I go right to the comments, because I want to know what's missing. Is there a gap? What else should we be doing to serve people? So I kind of just jump right to the opportunity areas, and look at the strengths, because I want to make sure we continue whatever's in place, that we continue that and we take it to the next level. But then I go right to the opportunities. So we are actually very diligent about measuring it through our formal surveys and then our pulse surveys. And then, of course, our employees, our folks have one-on-ones and with the employees. And then we also have our 6 employee resource groups and a Mavs Inclusion Council of about 30 people. And so all those things help us actually measure how we're doing, so that we can take some very positive action. In order to, and then we, of course, have an anonymous hotline, because we said, you know what, if all else fails and you just don't feel comfortable for whatever reason raising it, call the hotline. And then we'll take those hotline. Obviously you deal with it right then, but then we stop a few times a year to say, okay, what kind of calls have been coming in? I mean, if calls have been coming in. I mean, we've had times like now where no calls are coming in, but if calls are coming in, then we'll look at, okay, how much are we hearing that? And then we'll start to test it internally. Yeah. Okay, so in terms of sustainability, the way we have our values that spell crafts, but our diversity, equity, and inclusion agenda also spells crafts. And so we look at customers. So we have objectives and strategic action items around all of these areas. And that's one thing I always like to advise people, is to have an expressed agenda around culture, an expressed agenda around inclusion. So it's customers, reputation. We want to have a reputation for being a great place to work. Our leadership promise is every voice matters and everybody belongs. And so we want people to feel that. So we want to have a reputation, because we want to win the war for talent. The A is for agenda for women. In our case, we had to have an express agenda for how we would educate, empower, elevate women. So then the F is family, and that includes home, work, and community. That we are Mavs fans and family for life. How do we bring all of that together? Integration is important to us. And then the T is for talent. We want to have representation. We want our workforce to reflect our communities at every single level, even including around my table. When I first got to the Mavs, there were no women or people of color in leadership positions. And now we have 50% women and 50% people of color, just fabulous, qualified people, all of us working together, which I think our results, I think that has a lot to do with our results. So our talent and how we elevating people, professional development, all that. So we have metrics around that, and then suppliers and sponsors. And when you look at even like on the community piece, our philanthropic dollars, I mean, we have some objectives around the actual goals that we have, how we're serving underrepresented communities. So when you look at that customer reputation, agenda for women, family, talent, suppliers, and sponsors, that crafts D&I agenda, we have specific measurements around that. And every year in our business plan, we revisit that and take it even further. So we have a big business planning meeting. We're in our business planning cycle right now. We have a big meeting coming up with the whole organization August 10th. They will hear all about it because they're providing input right now, what that new kind of crafts D&I agenda looks like. So we keep it in the DNA, and we have it in the DNA. We keep it in front of people, and our employee resource groups really, really help to drive it along with the Mavs Inclusion Council. It's just a part of who we are now. It's not a program, and that's usually my advice. You can't have a D&I program. It has to be in your DNA.
It's so remarkably similar to what we're doing. I mean, it's kind of eerie. It really is, which is neat, because successful organizations kind of model each other too, which is very important. I think, for example, we have a women's initiatives group that has changed the culture in the Army, and I'm so proud of them. They've done a remarkable work, and shout out to led by the fabulous Maria Gervais and Susan Anthony and Michelle Donahue and Jen Bales, and just an incredible little team of people that have made an inordinate amount of change in our organization for the better. And then you take on, you would talk about a campaign plan. You talked about a business plan. I'm talking about a campaign plan. That's how you maintain these things. You have a place to where you're going. You have an end strength goal or an end state goal that says we want to be a better organization. We want to have the vision to be the station of choice, for example. We want TRADOC. We want people to be inspired to serve in TRADOC. We want people to understand that what they do matter. It matters to the nation. It matters to the world, for that matter. And so that's how you build that in. As Cynt said, it's about the DNA of the organization, right? Our strength is our diversity. It always has been. That the Army has changed, led in social change and culture forever. And so why would we change that when it's worked so successfully? And so I think when you get the opportunity to lead America's sons and daughters, to actually help them achieve success along the way, to be part of, whether they stay 3 years or like a broken down old cavalryman like me and 38 years later, when you get to put on the cloth of our nation and see it and feel it and understand that it is trusted around the world. Because it's so diverse, it's so inclusive, it is so strong and mighty, it's so powerful. I'm a little sappy when it comes to that. I get pretty excited about talking about our great Army. But how do you build that? Through organizations that they're not programs, they're part of the DNA, just like Cynt said. She's exactly right.
It's a model. The Army is a model. And I actually refer to the Army all the time. It is a model. I mean, you take all of these people, you meet them where they are. They all look different. Okay, they truly all look different. And before you know it, they're all on the same page, family, looking out for each other, trusting each other, and defending us. And they don't even know us.
Right.
Okay, now that's a model. That is the model. And I actually use that as an example a lot. And in fact, my kids grew up and they still do it, and I love it. And they're 24, 27, 30, and 39, and they still do it because I always have them stop wherever they are. And ever since, I met the little honeys when they were adopted, I have them honor and stop and thank our service people. And
Well,
so you see people, they get on the plane, they stop and say thank you. And part of what I told them is, they save us, they keep us so we can walk around free and all that stuff. But they're literally defending you, and they love you, and they don't even know you.
yeah, that's right. Well,
Like, that's heavy.
so this guy behind me, if you can see this placard behind me here, I don't know if you can see his face. I may be blocking it. But the guy behind me there, right up above me, is Dave Bellavia. Dave's a Medal of Honor recipient from the Second Battle of Fallujah. And when people come up to him and say, thank you for your service, he looks them right back in the eye. And you may have met David up there many times, but he hangs out in the Dallas area quite a bit. But Dave will look them right back in the eye and say, you're worth it. Frankly, the American people are worth it. So I stole that from him. I use that all the time now. I love it because it's true. And it's true. It's what we do. And so, that to me is that might even become a fundamental. We'll see after I'm done here.
I love that. But that's why the Army is such a good model. And that's how you want, as a leader, you want your employees to be. You want them to just be able to work together. You want to have the onboarding process and everything set up and the right leaders in place to where before you know it, all of these different people who have walked through the door, who don't know each other, who look very different, who come from very different backgrounds, are all bought in, and they're looking out for each other, and they know what the mission is, and they're going to win. They know how to measure it. They know what to do. I mean, that's the Army. And so we all aspire to have that kind of culture where we can bring these different people together. Number one, to have different people, because it's just so natural and fundamental for the Army. Some of the rest of us have to go out and figure out, because we haven't been doing it as long as the Army. So how do we break out of this space where we thought this was only for a certain group of people and welcome all of these other people in like you have done forever? And for some places it's a struggle. And so we have kind of figured that out. How do we bring in all of these different people and get them rallied around a mission with trust as the base? And it is truly it's in our culture now, which is the hardest thing was actually kind of instilling this new culture, this kind of Army-like culture, instilling this new culture, but purging one that was different. And because you still have, pockets or, people resisting change or whatever, but we've been able to work through that.
We have to do the same thing. I mean, getting rid of the shark attack was not easy. And we have pockets of people who believe they know better and who believe that, and so it becomes a consistent. That's the great thing about what you're saying on your value crafts, because it's got to be a consistent, a repeatable message that you truly believe in, that allows the organization to model itself because they understand where they're going, left and right, vision, etc. It's really dynamite.
Exactly. And it requires what I call all-in leadership. In fact, once we kind of, put our new values up on the wall and we did some, just physical, really transformation of our workspace, because the people were kind of working in silos and all these cubicles and all that. We left the building and then we all came out, everything was unveiled on the walls and all that. And we walked back in and we dipped our hand in paint and we put our handprints up on this wall that's still in our still in the workplace, that basically said, we're all in, and we're going to have all in leadership. And it stands for leading with intent. I talked about that earlier, being very intentional about who we are and what we're trying to accomplish, leading with insight, like really getting to understand each other, getting to understand, differences between diversity and inclusion and equity and equality, and really getting insight into what this is all about and what are we trying to do here. Leading with inclusion, to make sure it's not just about diversity, but it's about inclusion. I always say that, diversity, and you've probably heard that before, diversity is about, the ingredients. It's about the mix. But inclusion about what you do with that mix. Diversity is about counting the numbers. Inclusion is about making the numbers count. And then my favorite is diversity is being invited to the party, but inclusion is being asked to dance. You can invite me to the party as the only woman or the only Black person or whatever, but how do you make me feel when I'm at that table? Do you teach me the different moves? Do you teach me the rules of the road so I can participate? Because this is new to me. I've never been here before. And then do you go so far as to even accept like the dance moves that I might bring? You don't just invite me to the party and leave me on the sideline or just have me sitting at that table, but I need to be able to participate and be included. And so you have to lead with inclusion. You have to be very, intentional, if you will, about making sure you're not just focused on diversity, but equity and inclusion as well. Because if you're not including people, you'll lose them. And then the last one, and you mentioned this word earlier, General, and so I had to pick up on it, is leading with inspiration. Really inspiring people and figuring out how to inspire them and being vulnerable enough to open up yourself as a leader to inspire people, and then to make sure that you yourself are staying inspired in whatever way that needs to happen, because people respond when they are inspired. They respond beautifully when they're inspired. And you mentioned that word earlier.
Yeah, that's so true. The inspiration, we forget that sometimes, the inspiration part of leadership, right? It is an element, leadership's an element of combat power, but inspiration is what causes combat power to succeed. So we have to inspire, and so in our job, and certainly in TRADOC, where we have the recruiting mission, we have the accessions mission, we're bringing young men and women into our great force. And we also have the Soldier for Life piece, which is taking those great folks who have served. And you may remember I brought some Soldier for Life pins and things like when it came to your organization. And where we recognize that service to the nation matters, and thank folks not only for their service, but remind them that they're always part of our organization. They have a home, they have family, they have need. If they need help, we're there to help them. That's so powerful, and that too is in inspiration. And Mom and Dad America need to understand that these young men and women that we bring out, once they're in our organization, they're with us for life now, and we will find ways to help them.
I've seen it firsthand.
Yeah.
Especially with my brothers. I've seen it firsthand. Like, you never abandon them. No matter what they go through, they know they always have that fallback. They always have that family, which is how I always know, they'll always be okay. You have to, and they were inspired from the beginning. Yeah. From the beginning.
See, and
so
that's
inspiration really matters.
Yes, and that's what makes us so doggone successful.
Yeah, absolutely. We've been living with people at the center of our culture. Now we've just changed the way that we communicate how the people are at the center of our culture, and I think that's a huge. Yes. I think that's a huge thing that we've touched on all day today.
Yeah, I mean, the Army is people. I mean, there's all kinds of equipment and stuff like that. I mean, yeah, but the Army's people, and it's the world's last great meritocracy, right? It really is. It really is, and so and that's why we want to associate with world-class organizations that have the same values as we do, which is why we brought Cynt in, and she was so gracious to have that we've canceled and changed it all. She was so gracious to hold this time for us and do this for us. I can't thank you enough.
Of course, I have to pick up on that because I agree with that. You and I talked about it in Dallas. People matter, and that's all that matters. At the end of the day, I know Teddy Roosevelt has a quote, or it's at least attributed to Teddy Roosevelt, that says, "People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care." And yes, that's one, and that's my favorite quote, because it really is about caring about people. If you don't care about them, you can't lead them.
My favorite one
from them, you can't lead them.
My favorite one from Teddy Roosevelt's "The Man in the Arena." Yeah, that's a good one. You've probably seen it. You had seen it, I'm sure you've seen it. He talks about it's not the credit, not the critic who counts, but the man or woman who's actually in the arena, who's marred by dust and blood and comes out, fails, but time and time again triumphs over high achievement. Right?
Yeah.
Really neat. Very powerful.
Ooh, I love that. I got to get that in one of my commencement speeches.
I use that one a lot.
But people are inspired by those kind of quotes. People are inspired by stories, things that they can actually hang on to. And I'm absolutely, before we hang up, so you got to give me like 2 minutes before we hang up, so I can tell you how I inspired our team around character. And it's a story that they talk about all the time. And so you let me know when we get to the end, because that's
all right.
I'm going to tell you the story.
I think we got time for one more question, then we'll do the summary. So that'll be ready.
We have.
I'll be ready.
We are here for you, Miss Marshall, and your story. So share away.
Gad, we could go for 4 or 5 more hours.
Okay, so you want me to do it now, or you
yes,
want me
ma'am. You
yeah,
can
go
share
ahead.
your story.
Okay, so when I talk to my team about crafts and let them know, and that character was not just because it was the C, but it truly was the most important out of all of them. I gave them a story about that resonated with me around character and integrity. When we adopted my son, who is 30 now, but when we adopted him at 2.5 years old, just pitiful little story, but we adopted him at 2.5. When he was about 3.5 years old, 4 years old, he was in preschool, and they had a baby picture contest. And so we didn't have any baby pictures, of course, of my son, because when we met him, he was 2.5 years old. And all we had is this one picture of him. And he actually, you could tell from looking at the picture that he had been through a lot. And so I told my husband, well, he's going to have to take that picture or a current picture. And so I'm in the house and I'm getting ready, dinner and all that. And I look at my husband is practicing with my son because, they're going to make this presentation on his baby picture. And it's actually a baby picture, but it's not a picture of my son. And so I told my husband, I said, what are you doing? I said, that's not him. He goes, I know. I mean, it's my husband's nephew, our nephew, Jalen. He says, but he's just gonna act like it's his picture. Well, first of all, they're not even like the same complexion, so I don't even know how you think you're gonna get away with this. But they had this whole story mapped out. My husband and my son are sitting here with this whole story mapped out about this baby picture, and it's not my son, and the story is not my son's story. But my husband said, when we adopted this boy, he had been through a lot, and my job as his dad is to give him self-esteem and confidence and make sure that, he doesn't have any embarrassing situations. And there was this whole stigma around adoption. And so we're going with this. So we went back and forth. I lost. I went off to work to San Francisco the next day. I come home and the trophy from the baby picture contest is on my kitchen table. And I mean, it's huge. It's as big as the kid, right? And I'm sick. My husband is reared back. He's all happy because, his job as the daddy is to give him self-esteem. My son is smiling. He's thrilled. And so he goes, and I'm shaking because I know the whole thing is a sham, right? And so my son said, Mommy, I won the trophy. I won the baby picture contest. Do you want to know what happened? And I actually kind of did not want to know what happened, but he told me anyway. He goes, Mommy, I got up, and my husband is cheesing because he hadn't heard the story. He said, I got up and I held up the picture. Now, my son's name is Kenneth Anthony. My nephew's name is Jalen. He said, I got up, I held up the picture, and I said, hi, everybody. This is my cousin, Jalen. He said, I don't have a baby picture because I was born in the bathtub, and then my mother left me when I was 9 months old when my brother and the police came. And so he's telling his whole little story as he knew it at 3.5, 4 years old. He said, so I have a lot of cousins. I have like a bajillion cousins, and this is one of my cousins. He said, Mommy, everybody started crying, and they just gave me the trophy. Here's the moral to the story around character. At 3.5 or 4 years old, because he was somewhere in there, with his parents' permission to lie, the most important authoritative people in his life. And not only did he have permission, like he had help writing the story, okay? At 3.5, 4 years old, with his parents' permission to lie, the boy got up and told the truth. Why did he do that? Because at 3.5, 4 years old, it is in us to tell the truth. Character is in us, integrity is in us, and it's hard for people to even try to get us to do anything different. We have to stay that way. So that is how I talk to my team about character. And we say that even right now. You know what? We better act like we're 3.5 or 4 years old. Okay? we need to tell the truth. So that's my character story.
That was beautiful. That was a wonderful story.
You did mention that we needed to come back to the C and the character piece because you had some just great insight, and I think that's a fantastic way to, unfortunately, wrap up our discussion. But Ms. Marshall, we cannot thank you enough for taking time to join us and share your insights on organizational transformation and just all the beautiful things that you've done for the Mavericks. So is there anything else you'd like to share before we wrap up today?
Well, it's my honor, and I just wanted to say thank you. I mean, thank you to all of the men and women and just everybody who is out there, all genders reflected. Thank you for what you do every day to serve us and to have it so that I can just get up in the morning, leave my house, come back home, sit in this chair. No bomb is on my house. Nobody's out there doing anything crazy. And I am well aware every single day that the way I live my life is absolutely a result of what you do for me every single day. So thank you. I am honored to have spent this time today.
I can thank you all the time, but thank you so much for being here today. I know you're very busy, but thank you again. General Funk, is there anything you'd like to share before we wrap up?
I got all misty-eyed there, Cynt. Thanks for that. You know, I'm a pretty soft soul anyway, but I got to tell you, you spending this time with us today, and this will be my last official one. Sarah and I we're doing the Defense Warrior Games in a couple of weeks, where our Wounded Warriors come together from all the services. It's going to be down at Disney World, and watching them overcome the obstacles in front of them and actually achieve greatness in sport, but more importantly, healing of spirit and soul is going to be so powerful. But I can't think of a better way to end my time in this leader development program than with you and what you've done and how you lead and how you show us what right looks like in the professional sports, where the money is out there all over the place, and it can have all kinds of bad effects, where you have taken an organization, turned it, made it very successful in the playoffs this year. I was watching. And just through your own personal inspiration, I just can't thank you enough. And as Dave would say, by golly, you're worth it. Thank you, ma'am.
Oh, my goodness. Thank you. I love you. You know I do. You know I love you. Come back to Dallas and visit. I
can't wait. Got a granddaughter right there. I'll be there shortly.
I can't wait. I'll be waiting for you.
All right.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks again.
What a fantastic way to wrap up General Funk's final LPD with us, sir. It's going to be really tough not having you sitting next to me, sharing your commanding general insight from such a great place of leadership that you are. So thank you for providing all of the insight and just great coordination and just sharing everything that you have in your expertise to this profession. So thank you for sharing that with us. But transforming an organization, whether it be professional sports, team, or even a military enterprise like TRADOC, it requires support from those within the organization itself to be successful. Buy-in comes from the leaders who demonstrate through their own actions the effectiveness and the desired outcome the transformation will have on the organization. By keeping the foundation of the organization, which are the people, at the center of the process, an organization can ensure the changes being implemented are adopted and withheld with enthusiasm. The Army continues to reform and improve every element of the force with people at the forefront of every change. Adapting to be the profession of choice for those currently serving and who will serve us in the future is so important. And I want to, in just 3 short days, on July 28th, we'll be back here for our next LPD with a special panel to discuss their Army stories and how their services impacted their lives. And Command Sergeant Major Dan Hendricks will be the host of that one. So I hope you all join us here at 11 a.m. Eastern, same time, same place. And as always, thank you for joining us, and victory starts here.
Right here.